The border war is back, and we're going to be breaking it down. A little bit of an early preview, crossover edition of Locked On Jayhawks and Locked On Mizzou on today's episode.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. John Miller, he runs Locked On Mizzou, and we've got a crossover episode for you today, whether you're listening through Locked On Jayhawks or Locked On Mizzou. Thanks for joining us. And we're going to be breaking down the game. It's a pretty big one. You might have heard of it, the border war, border showdown, I guess they're officially calling it.
No, it's the war. It's the war.
It's got to be, right? Yeah. Right? Yeah. So at least we can both agree on that. We'll see how much else green we do throughout the episode. But we've got our top storylines. We've got our big player performances, players to watch, and how does Mizzou win? How does Kansas pull off this upset on the road? We'll get into all that on today's episode. And today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Maybe use Monarch to help you save money to afford tickets to this game. You can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, John, I appreciate you hopping on here. Obviously, this is a fun week of the season. It doesn't feel right being in September. I guess
right.
This game's not in like November or something like that. But obviously, this is a big one. And anytime you have a rivalry game like this, to me, is what college sports is all about. It is about the rivalries. And I think you could argue this is one of the most undersold, underappreciated from a national perspective rivalries in the country. So what to you are some of the biggest, storylines and things you're excited for in this game?
Well, to me, just from Missouri's side, there's been some kind of breaking news here injury-wise. Missouri's place kicker is out for the season, Blake Craig. So Eli Drinkwitz, a guy who typically doesn't go for it on fourth down a lot. Are we going to see more aggression against Kansas, especially in a big spot? Beau Pribula, a guy who can run the ball. It looks like Ahmad Hardy is a heck of a running back, too. I think it kind of fits what Missouri likes to do. And overall, kind of my biggest storyline is, on paper, I think most people would agree Missouri has more talent. But, man, I hate to say this. It hurts me deep in my soul to give you any credit. But really, Lance Leipold can coach, and Jalon Daniels can play some football too. And really, correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, I think this early matchup kind of favors Kansas a tiny bit from a Daniels perspective because, well, he has been banged up sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, the big question is to me kind of going to be, how do both defenses stop the quarterback run? Because we've seen when Jalon really gets it going and when Kansas is in bigger moments, bigger games, which for them, I mean, this is as big as it comes this season, right? You're going to be using that option in Jalon's legs a little more. And then in the games where maybe it's a little less, like last week, he only has 3 carries because you don't want to use those carries up for a guy who has had some injury stuff in the past. And then on the flip side, Beau Pribula, I mean, is obviously a very good runner. KU in the past has struggled defending the quarterback run. It's a new defensive coordinator this year, so I don't entirely know how that's going to go this go around. That's going to be like a huge part of this. And, you mentioned the kicker being injured. If it's a close game, that could factor in. KU's linebackers are all beat up, like Bengali Kamara being out right now. Joseph Sipp is already out. Like that could hurt you against the run. It certainly is interesting that we're only in, week 2 of the season, 3rd game for KU, 2nd game for Missouri, and there's already injury stuff that's kind of popping up to this point in time. And I think that's what, going back to the idea that this game's in September, I'm going to be very interested to see the repercussions of a game like this for the following weeks. Now, Kansas is a bye after, so maybe that helps them a little bit there. But do you expend so much physical and emotional energy, both teams on this game, that it hurts you for a week or 2 after?
Possibly. And, I think the schedule lands pretty well for Missouri in that case, too. Missouri doesn't have a bye, but they do have Louisiana before playing South Carolina in week 4. Some of you listeners may have noticed that, Louisiana lost to Rice 14-12 in week 1. So that not looking like quite maybe as of a tricky, trap game upset as maybe it did early in the season, I would say.
Yeah. And so when you talk about what does this game mean for the season, obviously it's no longer a conference game anymore. So from that standpoint, either team can lose this game and theoretically go play for a conference championship afterwards. So maybe that gets rid of some of it. But again, if this is the whole point of college sports, why it was started, these regional rivalries, and obviously this being the first time they've played in almost 15 years, it almost does mean everything while not meaning a lot else at the same point in time. So what to you does this game mean in terms of the season for Missouri?
Well, just in terms of how the season is going to play out, I mean, I think Missouri has, just as it did last season, just certainly in 2023, they had a great season too, but Missouri has playoff aspirations, whether they say that out loud or not. I think 10-2 is the goal. I think you lose to Kansas in week 2, regardless of whether that's a conference game or not. I think that really puts you behind the 8 ball. And somewhat amusingly and naively this week, Beau Pribula said, well, gee, I thought this was just a sports rivalry, but wow, turns out there's a lot of hatred going on here. I just thought that was funny just to hear his perspective on it. But seriously, though, I do think it matters a lot. Again, it's been 14 years, almost 15 years. Who takes this rivalry the most seriously? Who is gung-ho for this thing? Because in the past, there's been upsets on both sides for decades because, hey, we'd love to just ruin Kansas's season and vice versa sometimes. Is there going to be that level of hatred in the stands? Absolutely. And on the television sets from all the viewers? No question. On the field, that's what I'm really curious to see.
Yeah, you almost wonder if like the crowd is going to be the ones that ignite it in a real
and that
way,
helps
right?
Missouri too. I mean, the crowd's going to be electric. There's no doubt about it, and that alone should juice the Missouri sideline, but really it should juice the Kansas sideline too. They have beating hearts and blood's pumping through their chest too.
Yeah, no, it's going to be great too that we get these, back home and away as opposed to there was something about it being at Arrowhead, but I don't know. It's something about it being on campus makes it nice.
Much better. Listen, the Armageddon game, that was incredible. A sellout. The 2008 game was obviously not as great for me, but still well attended. Other than that, man, the attendance really dropped in those things. To me, keep it on campus.
Yeah, no, it definitely adds to the intrigue and the fun and everything. Well, I think this is really important because, from the Kansas perspective, like this game almost becomes not just about Kansas. I mean, I don't think KU fans really care like, oh, we have to hold the water for the Big 12. But from a Big 12 perspective, the rest of the conference is like, hey, we need this more so than the SEC. Like, if Missouri loses to Kansas, the SEC is going to be just fine. The SEC's
That's an
PR is
interesting
going to be
point.
just okay. But from the Big 12 perspective, it would do them a lot of wonders to nab one on the road against an SEC team. And so, I don't know who ends up winning the Big 12 at the end of the day. TCU looked good. Utah looked pretty good in week 0. I think if Kansas wins this game, you're going to start talking yourself into, at least I am, the Kansas can win the Big 12. They can at least compete to win the conference because you mentioned from a talent perspective. I mean, from a talent perspective, we'll see if Missouri ends up being as good as like say Utah or TCU, but from a talent perspective, certainly they're just as good, if not better than some of those schools. So like you could make the argument, this is the most talented team that Kansas is going to play this season. And from that perspective, if you can beat them on the road, why can't you compete for a Big 12 title in addition to what it would do for the Big 12 in terms of just that, public perception, especially after kind of an up and down week 1.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I as much as I hate to even imagine the scenario where Missouri loses, of course, yeah, if Kansas wins this game, of course they're going to be right in there in the Big 12. I think the Big 12 is, give me 7 or 8 teams I could see them winning the league at this point. And sort of to that idea, I think no matter who loses this game, it's going to feel like to the fans your season is over, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because that's college football. A lot can change as the season goes along, and we may look back and say, wow, actually, those were 2 top 20 teams or something like that. Who the heck knows? In fact, right now, the projections aren't too far off from that. I saw S&P Plus has Missouri 16th, Kansas 25. So, again, on paper, that's not a horrific loss either way. The problem is when it's Kansas and Missouri, it's going to hurt bad for somebody.
Yeah, it really is. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I want to get into
But that's the fun of it, like you said.
It is.
Yeah.
The fun and the defeat, either way.
Yeah.
So I want to get some players that are going to have a big impact on the result of this one and how either team comes out on top. We'll get to that next. And today's episode of the show is brought to you by Mazda. Maybe you're in need of a car to go from Lawrence to Columbia, and boom, get yourself a Mazda. They craft cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. As an athlete focuses on every detail too, Mazda does the same. From metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather, you can feel it the moment you get behind the wheel. The smooth handling, intuitive controls, and standard all-wheel drive in every crossover SUV. It's the small details that make the big plays. And just like that, there's more to every player. There's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. I continue on with our crossover episode, Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On Mizzou with John Miller. I'm Derek Johnson. So Kansas, Missouri, I think a lot of really intriguing players. We touched on a few, Jalon Daniels, Beau Pribula, Ahmad Hardy at the start of this. I want to frame this like this. Who's a player that you think on Missouri is going to have the biggest impact? If you want to pick an offensive and a defensive guy, that's fine, on the results, in either direction for Missouri on Saturday.
Well, I think somebody Kansas fans might be familiar with from his Big 12 days at West Virginia. Josiah Trotter is a guy I'm expecting to be all over the field. And I watch, correct me if I'm wrong, I find a lot of similarities actually between Kansas and Missouri's offense in that they do a lot of pre-snap motion. Also, I found a lot of maybe Gus Bus similarities, some Gus Malzahn influence with what Lance Leipold tries to do with Jalon Daniels. And what I mean there is a lot of even more misdirection, I would say. I mean, faking speed options and then running it back the other way. The point here is that you need a guy like Trotter to be really, really disciplined in the middle of that defense, get everybody on the same page when they're shifting around and all that stuff. I think he's a guy who's going to have 10-plus tackles in the game, and, well, hopefully he's the type of player who can contain Daniels and keep him in the pocket a little bit too.
That's interesting, and I'm looking right now at what Trotter did in the game last year against West Virginia. He had 13 tackles with 0 missed tackles, so that's a pretty good performance. Now, KU did target him in the receiving game. He was targeted 3 times, gave up 38 yards on 3 catches. So it seems like he had a really good run defense game, maybe struggled a bit more in pass defense, so that could be very interesting if KU could exploit that in the same way on that end. I would say the guy to watch for KU, I mean, it's obvious that it's always the quarterback with Jalon Daniels, so I'm just not going to pick that one. Beyond that, I'm going to actually go with the other. You took a West Virginia linebacker. I'm going to take a West Virginia linebacker, Trey Lathan, who came over to Kansas. Trotter leaves West Virginia for Mizzou. Lathan leaves West Virginia for Kansas. And Lathan has had a solid start to this season, but now he's being asked to basically be like that. I mean, with the Bengali Kamara injury, who was expected to be your top linebacker this year. He misses the second game and could be out a few weeks. Then you get in a situation where Joseph Sipp, who was an all-MAC linebacker last season, he comes in and through spring ball, it seemed kind of like Sipp was ahead of Lathan on the depth chart. Now it sounded like Lathan was making positive moves in fall camp. Who knows what would have happened had Sipp stayed healthy, but that allowed him to, fully take down the starting spot. And he's been really solid for Kansas so far, but this is another level. Missouri, it just feels like every year now under Eli Drinkwitz, like it doesn't matter who the running back is, whether it's 2 guys or 1 guy, like it's going to be really productive. And obviously there has been a lot of talent there. And Ahmad Hardy, certainly had an unbelievable freshman season at UL Monroe. So I think Trey Lathan is the guy that I'm kind of looking at as like, hey, you're going to have to at least slow down their running game a little bit here. And when all these other linebackers are injured, like you need to be the constant, right? Because the other guys that are coming in for you, like they're going to have ups and downs. John Kamara is a freak athlete. He's going to have some flash plays. He's also a redshirt freshman. He's probably going to have a few mistakes. Trey Lathan needs to be the constant for KU. Now on the flip side of things, is there a player on Kansas from your perspective that you feel like could be the game wrecker, so to speak, from the Missouri side?
I don't know that I know the Kansas roster well enough, quite honestly, to make that. I've been focused really on the quarterback, Jalon Daniels. Also, I've been really focused on the linebacker core, and I feel like for Kansas, the lack thereof a little bit. I feel like we've broken that down.
Well, let me rephrase
pretty
this.
Well, like
let me rephrase this. Then.
I was gonna say you could throw one at me, but
yeah. Is there a positional, I don't know, like weakness or just a player on the Missouri side that maybe you're worried about being kind of the weak link?
Well, that frames it a little better for my tiny brain anyway. Let's put it that way. So thank you very much for that. But I would say, who are Kansas's really good pass rushers, and do they have any? Because as we discussed there, as you astutely brought up, in my opinion, Eli Drinkwitz can design a running game, and I think that'll be the case again this season. The pass protection is a question mark. It really is. Missouri late in camp kicked their All-American left guard, Caden Green, out to left tackle. The results were mixed in week one. That was about the only thing to complain about in week one. But still, is Kansas capable of taking advantage of that, of getting some unpredictable type of pressures? You tell me, Derek, what kind of pass rush, especially on the edge, does Kansas have?
So Dean Miller was all Big 12 second team last year. He missed the first game this year, came back for the FCS game. He had 6 sacks, 9 TFLs last year. So he's a solid pass rusher, more of a speed rusher. So if you're good handling speed, he's not as much of a power guy. So it'll just kind of depend how you're doing there. And then the other guy on the other end, it's kind of a rotation of 2 guys. You got Justice Finkley. He was at Texas for 3 years. He was, second string at Texas, and then comes to KU. He becomes a captain on this team, really strong guy. His backup is Alex Bray, who was kind of a rotational part-time starter, first, second string for Illinois in a different front last year. So they kind of rotate those 2 guys. So, it's a solid pass rush. KU's had good pass rush numbers through the first 2 games, but I mean, you're playing Fresno State and you're playing Wagner. It's obviously much different in terms of the bodies you're going to be going up against than the Missouri game. So there's been enough there to give me hope. The KU defensive tackles are the position group that I think people had the most faith in on the KU defense coming into the season. So, it's a group that I feel good about, but I don't know that they have, like 2 years ago when you had Austin Booker, 3 years ago when you had Lonnie Phelps, like they don't have that, like, I don't necessarily think all Big 12 first team type of pass rusher who's going to get you 10 sacks. Maybe Dean Miller, takes that next step this season, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. So I don't know if that's helpful for Missouri in some way. I mean, maybe it is. But I do think there also is going to be an emphasis by DK McDonald. He likes to mix things up a lot more than the previous DC did, right? There's going to be a lot more blitzes of everybody on the D line is standing up and it's who's coming. So it doesn't just become about, can somebody win one-on-one? It also becomes about, how is the offensive line reading what's coming at them?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Now I do think for me, from the Missouri side, like it's one of 2 guys that scares me. That either Ahmad Hardy, again, he has 10 yards per carry in the first game, over 1,300 yards at ULM a season ago, and that would scare me. That I guess in the back of my mind is that Arkansas Liberty Bowl game. I know it's so long ago, and like there's so many different players, and KU is more beefed up on the line than right. 3 years ago. But Arkansas was able to road grade KU with their bigger bodies and the SEC size, and that scares me a little bit there. The other side is I guess it's 2 transfers in from Georgia on the defensive line, in addition to already some returning starters there. Like that scares me a little because the KU offensive line was really good against Wagner, but it was Wagner, and in the week before against Fresno, overall it was a good game, but Jalon Daniels took a lot of shots.
He did.
In that game.
Yeah, I watched that game too, and he was maybe having to run around a little more, I think, than Lance Leipold would have liked. Definitely was taking a surprising amount of shots, but, there was a game where you started off, KU was a 13-point favorite. You can't exactly just assume a victory, but, watching that game, I have to say, overall, I was fairly impressed with the Jayhawks. They controlled the game, and certainly the defense made E.J. Warner's life difficult in that one.
Yep. Okay. I want to finish up here. How does Missouri win this game? How does Kansas win this game? We'll get to that next with our Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On Mizzou crossover. And this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season's almost here, and FanDuel's making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Plus, we got college football this weekend, right? Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. You can actually get lines on the KU Missouri game, although I guess if you're in Missouri, they're still in the process. I don't know if that's been fully gotten through or not. Regardless, it's coming at some point. I guess just make your way over to Kansas City on the Kansas side, and then you'll be able to get it somewhere. But you can get Missouri. They're about a touchdown favorite right now, officially over at FanDuel, going off at -6.5. You can get Kansas plus 6.5. You can get Kansas on the money line for the upset plus 184. The over-under is 50.5. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you've got put off organizing finances, Monarch's just for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You can identify that you aren't saving as much as you thought. Monarch helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation and discover forgotten 401ks from past jobs. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Continuing on with our crossover episode, Locked On Jayhawks, Locked On Mizzou. Don't forget, you can check out Locked On College Football too for your second listen every day. He's John Miller, and I am Derek Johnson. So I guess this boils down to this. Missouri wins if what happens?
I think if Missouri controls the line of scrimmage, especially in the passing game, if the Tigers can keep Beau Pribula upright, I just don't know if the Jayhawks are going to be able to score enough points. Now, if they do make Beau Pribula's life a little bit difficult, if they can bottle up the Missouri running game just to a reasonable expectation level, then yeah, we've probably got a nail biter on our hands. But I really think if Missouri, if they dominate offensively, if that offensive line can win the battle, I just think it's going to be really tough for Kansas to get it done.
Do you have a lean on any of those? Missouri -6.5 or over under 50.5?
You know, I guess I would probably lean more toward the under early in the season here. I just think that especially Missouri likes to control the ball regardless of how good their offense is. Eli Drinkwitz has never been a Josh Heupel type of offense where he's snapping it with 25 seconds left on the play clock. So to me, and I think there's been nationally, by the way, scoring was kind of down in week one. I think the trend is toward the unders right now. I'm an under kind of better anyway, even though it's the boring bet. That's kind of the point, though. The fans like to bet the over, so guess what? I like to go the other way.
Yeah, no, it's usually the smart bet. I actually do lean the under as well from a standpoint of, okay, rivalry game, like teams are going to be playing hard. Maybe sometimes you're a little juiced up and you overthrow that pass here or there. I do think the Missouri defense is one of the best in the country. I do have questions about, how the offensive line's going to handle things at both ends. And yeah, I could see this being, 20-17 or something like that where it does end up under. For me, Kansas wins the game if I mean, for one, Jalon Daniels has to have a top tier game. Like this has to be one of the best games of Jalon Daniels' career. And it doesn't just cut that doesn't necessarily mean statistically, right? He could have 220 yards passing, 60 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns, no picks. It's more so he's got to avoid the interceptions. Like can't have that in a road game, raucous environment against a good defense, especially if it is going to be a lower scoring game. Got to take advantage of those possessions. But it really is with the legs and scrambling, because if Missouri's D-line is at least semi-regularly winning against one or two of the KU offensive linemen, he's going to have to make plays with his feet, not just to actually pick up yardage, but just to be able to scramble and get throws off. And so that's where I think he has to have one of his best games that he's had in a KU uniform. And then, yeah, I think the other one is just slow down the running game of Missouri. It goes twofold. It goes with Ahmad Hardy. Can you slow him down? Can you avoid giving up a game where, he has 6 yards per carry, 7 yards per carry? Can you have a game where, even if he's solid, it's 4.5 yards per carry if you're KU? The typical number for, with Lance Leipold in their era, and I forget the exact number at this point now, but they're winning one every 3 or 4 games when they're giving up more than 4.5 yards per carry in the Lance Leipold era, versus the flip side is they're winning, 2 out of every 3 or something like that. So, can you do that? Can you slow down the running game? And then the other prong of that, I mentioned two-sided, is the quarterback run game with Missouri. the previous defensive coordinator, their regime really struggled stopping scrambling quarterbacks. They had some big games against them last year. For instance, Matthew Sluka had over 100 yards rushing. Avery Johnson had nearly 70 yards rushing. Sam Levitt had like 70 yards rushing. I mean, there were some big games against them. And Beau Pribula is a very fast runner. We saw it on that like 30-yard run he had against Central Arkansas. That was the reason he would come in for Penn State. And so from that perspective, again, you're going to give up something. Like Ahmad Hardy and Beau Pribula are good enough where they're going to put up something, but can you slow them down as opposed to them just going off? I think those are the keys for me for KU pulling the upset here.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting with that whole thought in mind there. How does Kansas approach this game defensively? Do they try to dare Missouri to throw the ball over the top? Do they focus on stopping Ahmad Hardy and Beau Pribula in the run? I think I might early, really, just to see how nervous the relatively inexperienced Pribula might be in the ball game. I think that's probably how I would play it. Will that work or not? I don't know. But again, I'm talking about trends nationally. Seems like the trend nationally is more like the trend of the NFL the last couple years. If I don't know if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, Derek, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners are. All the talk about Mahomes, of course, is, well, everybody's playing two high safeties, just keeping everything in front of them, giving up the 5 to 8 yard gains. Seems like that's kind of been the trend in college football here early. Does Kansas do that? If so, again, bet that under for sure if you think there's any chance of that.
There we go. All right. Well, John, I appreciate the time, man, and should be a fun week. Should be a fun weekend for us, or a very sad weekend for one of us and a fun weekend for the other one of us. Where can everybody check out all your stuff?
Well, Locked On Mizzou, YouTube, and anywhere you listen to podcasts, of course, and everywhere on social media at Locked On Mizzou, M-I-Z.
There we go. And I'm Derek Johnson, Locked On Jayhawks, same areas. You can find all those as well. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again to John. Thank you to you for listening. And it's almost game time. We got the Border War. It's officially back after almost 15 years. Thanks for joining us.